Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, which we will take you through a sort of step-by-step guide to completing the radio relevant turnover return. This is a return that you do in the Ofcom Online Services portal, the Market Intelligence database called MID. So first things first, I thought it'd be helpful if we sort of introduce the Ofcom Radio Mid team. You've received emails from us in the past, so we thought it would be a good idea to sort of introduce ourselves. So my name is Mark Pearson. I'm a senior analyst in the Radio Mid team, and with me on the call today is Neil Anderson, who's another senior analyst. Also in the Radio Mid team is Eleni Maruli, who's head of market developments, responsible for data collection overall from our media stakeholders, and also our colleague Julian, who you may also know, who works across radio and TV. So we sit within the Ofcom's wider research intelligence team, and the team as a whole leads in the programmatic collection of data from industry. So not just radio, but TV, VOD, telecoms, posts, and of course now online services. And the research intelligence team also manages Ofcom's program of consumer research and audience measurement. So the Radio Mid team also leads on in industry analysis for the radio and wider audio sectors. And so if you do see us at conferences, please do come and say hello. We're always keen to talk to our stakeholders, and the insights that you provide us really are valuable and are the cornerstone of our evidence base. And just as a reminder, as there are several of us in the team, it's always better to contact the team with using the Radio Mid email address rather than trying to email us directly or trying to leave voice messages. Because with a centralized email, we can log and respond to any of your queries more quickly. So looking at why we collect the radio relevant turnover data. Well, firstly, licensees are required as part of their license conditions to provide Ofcom with relevant data when requested. And when we're talking about commercial licenses, we're referring to the type of license you hold, not whether or not your organisation is run on a profit or not-for-profit basis. So that means a charity, a KIC, or other non-profit organisation can and do hold licenses which we class as commercial, for which a radio relevant turnover return is required. So the commercial licenses include the national and analogue commercial licenses, which you use for broadcasting on AM or FM, the analogue additional service license, which is only one. Radio licensable content service, so RLCS licenses, which you use broadcasting on cable and satellite TV platforms, and also the local and national digital sound program, the DSP licenses, used for broadcasting on DAB and DTT. Note that the DSP license is not the same as a community digital sound program, a CDSP license. And we use the data you provide us in a range of ways. So we use it, for example, to set fees for the analog AM/FM licenses. So our finance team calculates your fees payable to Ofcom based on the turnover you provide. Turnover information is also used when determining a licensee's obligations around the provision of news. And we also, of course, for all the licensees we collect data from, we use it for the data for statistical purposes, for producing our statistics, and also to monitor the radio market more generally. So we use your radio relevant turnover data to publish industry total data each year as part of our official statistics. And we provide more detail and analysis around this in our annual Media Nations report. We also publish data each year on analogue local radio revenues for each of the UK's nations. And this industry level data that we do publish does differ from the industry data which is published by Radio Centre. So our data is net of agency commission, and that's why you're asked to provide both gross revenues and the agency commission paid in your mid-return. And our data also includes the other relevant turnover revenue. In contrast, the Radio Centre data includes a digital category, and we understand this includes revenues which may potentially sit under the other revenue category on your radio relevant turnover return, and so which wouldn't be included in our published totals. But it's fair to say we certainly do see similar trends in both data sets, i.e. the relative resilience of national spot and sponsorship revenues, and a long-term structural shift away from local spot. And we're aware that your own organisation may have very different trends reflecting differences in business models and your relative exposure to different revenue streams, and also, of course, differences in local advertising markets. While we obviously can't go into lots of detail in our external publications, it is important that we and our colleagues in the policy and licensing teams understand your own unique experiences of the market. Your radio relevant turnover returns and the conversations we have with you are therefore central to it. So, as well as keeping Ofcom's policy and licensing teams abreast of the market, the research and intelligence team also makes available a wide range of data to our stakeholders, including industry, free of charge on our website. Our annual flagship Media Nations reports, published each summer, draw together analysis of industry and audience data across the radio and audio, TV and video sectors and beyond. And in addition to a report covering UK-wide developments, we also publish reports doing deeper dives into Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. We generally run stakeholder events in the nations in the autumn to discuss findings from the CMR and CMR and Media Nations reports. So to find out about these in the future, please make sure you're subscribed to the Ofcom newsletter or check our social media channels. And it really would be great to see you at one of these events. We also publish data sets in our interactive communications market report. And again, that's not just radio industry data, but radar data around listening trends, and also our survey data around the take-up and use of audio-related services and devices. And then in the spring, in the audio listening report, we published findings from our consumer research focusing on audio behaviours and attitudes covering radio, podcasts, music streaming and other audio activities.
Thank you very much, Mark. So now to touch on the timelines for the data collection process this year. So each year we seek to give you a 6-week window to provide us with your relevant turnover data. This is in line with the deadline for TV broadcasters, and we try, where possible, to time things to avoid the deadline being the end of the traditional UK financial year and at around the Easter break. Those of us with backgrounds in finance teams know how important this is, of course, for you. So the deadline for the submission of the 2025 radio relevant turnover data is 11 AM on Wednesday, 18th of March, so next week. So following the deadline in March and April, we will review and analyse the data that you have provided to us. And as part of our quality assurance process, we may need to contact you if we have any queries about your submission. In some situations, we may also ask you to reconfirm the data. Therefore, the more background or explanation that you can provide us using the comments field in your return, the better. So following on from this, we will work to produce the aggregated industry totals that we publish in the Communications Market Report and the Media Nations reports. And then we will also license data to the finance team for tariffing purposes. It's important, of course, that the deadlines are met. If you believe that you will be unable to meet these deadlines, then please do contact us as soon as possible, rather than, of course, the day before or the day of the deadline. And it's always better to contact us well in advance if you know there may be issues. Details of licensees not meeting the deadline are then provided to Ofcom's licensing team, which may take more formal action, including enforcement. So the Market Intelligence Database, MID, is the system, of course, that through companies regulated by Ofcom provide the programmatic data to Ofcom. MID is accessed via the online services portal, and some of you may already actually be using this portal already. If, for example, you or your organization holds a wireless telegraphy license for use of Spectrum. However, there are differences between the way the Spectrum licensing and other online services work compared to MID, which means that you cannot self-register for a MID account via the website. Attempting to use the online services portal to create a MID account will not work and may mean that it takes us a bit longer to set up your account when you do get in contact with us. So there are two types of MID accounts. All organizations need at least one active MID contact with data submitter permissions. A MID contact with submitter permissions on their account can both input the data into the system as well as submit the data to Ofcom. In contrast, and on request, we can create MID accounts with the more limited permission to just enter the data into the system, but not submit it. We find that the vast majority of organizations request only MID data submitter permissions for their MID contacts. Your username is generally your email address. Please note that for data security reasons, an email address can only be associated with access to a single organization's MID return. So we can assign parent-child entities in the system to allow you a single login for maybe a group of different companies where you hold different licenses in different subsidiaries. But note that this means that the organizations are linked in the system and the MID contact of the parent entity can see data from all subsidiaries. We would need permission from the affected licensees to do this. In cases where you submit for two licensees that are independent of each other, you will need to use two different email addresses and have two completely separate MID accounts to keep the data for the different organizations separate. If you forget your passwords after having set your account up and logged in for the first time, you can do a password reset from the MID login page. Simply click on Forgotten Your Password, and then you can reset your password once every 24 hours. In the event that the reset does not work, please do get in contact with the Radio MID team. It is really important, of course, that licensees keep their contact details up to date with Ofcom. We understand that email addresses may, of course, be updated or changed, for example, as a result of a rebrand. But if you have done this, then please contact Radio MID from an existing address that we have on record to let us know about this. Please don't try and update your contact details yourself on the online services portal, and please, of course, do get in touch with us. To protect your data and privacy, we obviously can't discuss your organization's business with an unrecognized or personal email account. Otherwise, you will need to contact Ofcom's broadcast licensing team to inform them of the change. In any case, you're required to keep broadcast licensing up to date with the general contact details for your organization. And in particular, we expect you to keep the contact details for individuals with non-MID related roles up to date with the broadcast licensing team. The Radio MID team can action the updating of contacts at a licensee which aren't those of a MID contact. And finally, you need to tell us when a MID contact leaves your organization or no longer requires access to the system. Once activated, MID accounts will remain active until we are asked to deactivate them. Great. Next, we will move on to a walkthrough of how to complete your return in the online services portal. 1 second, I'm just going to share the online services portal and then we'll take you through the process. There we go. So you should be able to now see the online services portal page. And this is the first page that you will see when you log into the MID system. So at the top of the page, you'll see a box that shows any returns that are due imminently, so meaning returns due within the next 30 days. Of course, our deadline being next week. You'll also see your company details and your submission role, as well as your own contact details. In the middle of the screen, you'll see the return summary section. So this summarizes how many returns you have completed and how many you still need to complete. So to start working on a return, just click the View Returns button. This will then... Second. Thank you. Just bear with me and we will get back into the online services portal. There we go. There we go. Thank you for your patience while we got that sorted. So we'll now be able to see all the schedule returns associated with your license. If you've used the system before, you may see returns from previous years, which will have been marked as submitted to Ofcom. But for this demonstration, though, we're focusing on returns that have not yet been started. You can also filter returns as well using these filter selection boxes. So any that have not been started, you can filter by account and also the name of the service. For this demonstration, though, we're going to complete a return for a test license called Radio Test 11. So to start entering data into the return, press Complete. So hover over the license return that you want to complete and press the Complete button rather than View. Pressing View will open the return in a read-only mode, meaning you won't be able to enter any information. By clicking Complete, this opens the return, meaning that you can enter and edit the data. So this now takes us to the return. The first page asks a mandatory question. The question is, were you broadcasting during the return year? In this case, we're being asked whether the service was broadcasting at any time during 2025. For this example license, the answer is yes. So you'll select yes in the drop-down selection there. We were broadcasting for the entire year. If you were not broadcasting for the full year, you could enter a start and end date, for example, for the period when the service was on air. But in this case, we were broadcasting for the whole year, so we'll select yes to both of those questions. So we'll then go on to the next page. This is where we will be entering the advertising revenue data. So this is the first data entry page, which focuses on advertising. Before entering the figures, though, it's helpful to clarify perhaps what we mean by relevant turnover. The relevant turnover return collects revenue that relates specifically to the license service, and it is the figure used as the basis for analog license fees. Every business is of course structured differently, so we cannot give specific advice about exactly which revenues fall within relevant turnover for your organisation. Ultimately, it's the licensee's responsibility to ensure the return is complete and accurate. The statement of charging principles sets out the definition of relevant turnover. And really, in essence, the principle is that the fee calculation should reflect revenue derived from holding a radio broadcasting license. With that in mind, we can move on and complete the return. So the first section is local advertising. So this refers to local spot advertising broadcast on your service. In this example, we'll enter £120,000 as the gross revenue. Gross revenue, meaning, of course, the advertising revenue generated by your own station sales teams, typically from direct advertisers or smaller local agencies. Larger regional agency revenues, for example, from major agencies based in larger cities, for example, should generally be reported under national advertising instead. So now against that 120,000 gross revenue, we may have agency commission. So under the statement of charging principles, the maximum allowable agency commission deduction is 15% of advertising revenue and 15% of sponsorship revenue. In this example, we'll enter £12,000 of agency commission, which represents 10%. After entering those figures, we can then press the refresh button. The system will then automatically calculate the net local advertising revenue. We can then move on to national advertising. So this includes advertising sold through national sales houses or larger regional agencies. In this example, we will enter £300,000 of gross national advertising revenue. There we go. And again, we'll apply the 10% agency commission, which in this case is 30,000. And once again, we can press refresh, and that will then calculate the net national advertising revenue. We've now completed the advertising section of the return, so we can then move on to the next page, which is sponsorship. So the sponsorship revenue, of course, representing the total invoice value of sponsorship deals, and may also include co-production income. In this example, we'll enter £50,000 of gross sponsorship revenue, and then enter £7,500 of agency commission. And once again, we can refresh that to see the net sponsorship revenue in this case. So with that completed, we'll then move to the next page, and this is collecting other relevant turnover and other revenue. So this is essentially capturing other types of revenue not covered in the advertising and sponsorship sections. The first box is other relevant turnover. This is where you report revenue that qualifies as relevant turnover, but doesn't fall under advertising or sponsorship. This might include premium rate competitions, voting revenues, any other broadcast related income linked directly to the service. If you're unsure whether certain income should be included here, we recommend that you review the mid-user guide and the statement of charging principles, which can both be found on the website. In this example, we're going to enter £8,000 representing premium SMS revenue from an on-air competition. We can then click refresh, and as you can see, we now have a total relevant turnover figure, which is combining the advertising, sponsorship, and other relevant turnover data. This, of course, is important because this determines analog license fees and contributes then to our industry totals reported by Ofcom. We then have this other revenue box as well, and this refers to income that falls outside the definition of relevant turnover. So the examples might include any subscription income, program rights sales, event income, merchandise, the list goes on. But in this case, we're going to enter £200 for hiring out the studio, which forms part of our total revenue picture. And if we refresh that there, we can now see that we have a total revenue, which is obviously a combination of our previous inputs and then also the total relevant turnover. We encourage you, of course, to use the comment section if you have inputted any data into the other relevant turnover or the other revenue categories. And also if you wish to provide us further detail around any large year-on-year variances in any of the figures that you have provided to us. So in this case, we would be sharing that other relevant turnover includes £8,000 from premium SMS, from competitions, and other revenue of £200 from studio hire. And as you can see, we've now completed the return. If we look to go on to the next page, we can see that we've reached the final page. At this stage, you should be ready to submit the return. And you can do so by selecting the Ready to Submit button at the top here. And as you can see, this has given us two options to either reopen the return. So you may want to go back and rectify any problems that you have identified or provide further information in the comments box. But in this case, you can then go ahead and press the Submit Return to go to our final page. At this stage, when you're ready to submit the return, we just ask that you read a final statement and agree to the statements that you are authorised to submit this information on behalf of the licensed service, and that all of the details given in this form are correct to the best of your knowledge. And if you're happy to do so, of course, you can click I agree and then press confirm. And as you can see, the return has now been submitted. So that's the process, of course, of going through submitting the data return. As you can see, the return that we have completed has changed status to submitted. I would note here that anything other than submitted, as showing in the status line here, such as not started or in progress or ready to submit means that the return has not yet been submitted. So please do make sure that you complete the full process of submitting the return. You may also want to download a PDF version of the return that you've completed, and you can do that by generating a PDF and then saving that separately. What I'll just show you quickly as well is maybe there might be a circumstance where you have not been broadcasting on the service. And in this case, there's a shortened process for completing the return. So just in this second return, we will go to complete this. So for whatever circumstance you may be in a position where the service was not broadcasting at all during the return year, and as I mentioned, the process is simpler. You will just, on this very first page, where we ask whether the license was broadcasting during the return year, select no. And then you can then press the next page, and as you can see, this will mean that you're now ready to submit. And essentially what this does is report to us that there are 0 revenues to be submitted against this specific return. And then you can continue to do so. And once you agreed to the statements, we have now submitted that return for which we were not broadcasting on that license. Great, so that covers the process of submitting a radio relevant turnover return using the MID portal. I'm just going to go back to our slide deck and just talk through some further tips for completing your radio relevant turnover return. There we go. So yes, as we were mentioning there, it's really important that you provide us with information around your return using the comments box in the return. So whether that's large year-on-year variances, maybe an increase or a decrease of 10% or changes over 1 million, please provide us with further information as to what's maybe perhaps driven that. Explain what's been included in other relevant turnover and other revenue. Also, any further information that you can provide as to why a service was perhaps not broadcasting or was broadcasting but reporting 0 revenue, and as to why that's the case. Also, further information on simulcasting and how you've treated simulcast revenues, which we'll touch on shortly. And also if you're reporting revenues against another license. Also, if there are any preliminary data or estimated data at the point of the data return, then please provide us with that information and when you expect to provide any firmed up data. That would be greatly appreciated. And anything else more generally that you wish to draw our attention to in further context would be particularly useful, of course, when we come to quality assure the data. And a final note here, just about simulcasting community radio services. If you are simulcasting a service from an analog community radio license or a community digital sound program license onto a DSP or other license service, please be clear about how revenues are reported. So if you were already simulcasting in previous years, please follow the same reporting approach as you have done. For example, if you were previously apportioning revenue between services, please continue to do so. If you reported all revenue, for example, against the analog license and zero against the digital license, that is also acceptable. But please keep consistency with your previous submissions and provide detail in the comments box as to how you have treated your simulcast revenues. If simulcasting is new for you, you may either apportion revenue or report zero, but you should consult the guidance on Community Digital Sound Programme licenses, which is linked in the documentation on the website. Also remember that if a DSP license is used to provide another service, in addition to the simulcast, the revenue from that additional non-simulcast service should be reported in the mid-return. Great, so that's kind of covers everything around simulcasting. Mark, do you have anything to add or any sort of further tips on completing the returns?
So yeah, so please don't leave everything to the last minute. Also, we obviously do try and deal with queries as quickly as we can. We are dealing potentially with hundreds of licensees across radio and TV, and so things do get very, very busy just before the deadline. So the earlier you can talk to us about any issues or get in contact with us, the better. Likewise, if you won't be thinking about sort of submitting, it's worthwhile going into the system just to make sure that there's no issues with your password or user account and you're familiar with the system before you start entering the data. Also, if in doubt, use the comments box. It's always better to provide more detail than needed than less detail. It might mean that for example, we don't need to contact you as part of the QA process. Thirdly, please do follow the full submission process as Neil set out in the mid-system. There are many times when we have to contact people because they've entered data into the system, but they haven't actually submitted the return. So it's not clear whether their return is sort of part complete or whether it's fully complete and they haven't, people have forgotten to sort of submit the return. But until the return shows submitted to Ofcom, it is not a submitted in return and cannot be treated as such. Fourth, remember this is calendar year data. Unfortunately, for consistency across all licensees and for consistency across the media sector, we do require that data is reported to us on a calendar year, i.e. the year from 1st of January to 31st of December. The unit of currency is single unit pounds sterling. So for radio, we use single unit pounds sterling. I know for other sectors, possibly telecom, possibly TV, we use thousands. But for radio, please use units of sterling. And then finally, remember there's a maximum 15% agency commission allowed in the return. And we do have a range of different support available on our website to help you complete your returns. So we have the user guide, which we link to on our website, and which is also sent out to people when they create a MID account. We have a statement of charging principles where you can provide more information on what constitutes relevant turnover and our approach to setting of license fees. And finally, our community DSP license guidance sets out in a little bit more detail community radio license conditions and associated obligations and how simulcasting revenues may be treated in the case where you have an analog or CDSP license and you're also simulcasting on a commercial type license such as a DSP. And so finally, just to remind you, the deadline is the 18th of March, so a week today at 11 a.m. And it is important that that the deadline is met. And if you do have any issues about this, please do contact us as soon as possible. So thank you very much for attending this webinar. As always, if you do have any questions or queries, you can contact the Radio Mid team at radiomid@ofcom.org.uk, and we also have guidance available on our website. And so thank you very much.